All right. If you remember, we're almost finished with the Megillah of Purim, Magila of Esther. And as you remember, last time, Haman had almost got the Jews where he wanted them. He wanted to kill all the Jews, and he sent out a letter that all the Jews should be exterminated on a certain day. At first, it wasn't known which people it was, and then afterwards, Mordechai found out. In any case, there was this decree. And the king did not know that his wife, in fact, was a Jew. And the king had forgotten that Mordechai, who was a Jew, saved his life. But miraculously, the king couldn't sleep one night. Esther made 2 meals with the king and with Haman together. And after the first meal, Haman was really feeling great. I mean, he thought he was just, the top of the world. And that was the night that the king had this dream. And he dreamt, and the king couldn't sleep, and he had his diary brought to him. And there was written clearly that Mordechai saved his life. And so the king said, okay, Haman, take Mordechai, put him on a horse, and drive him through the streets. And saying, this is what happens to somebody who king respects, wants to give him honor. And Mordechai does so. And okay, then they come to the second meal. And in the second meal, this is what we learned last class. I'm just making a short summary. They came to the second meal. And in the second meal, the king really praises Esther. She really likes Esther. And he says, listen, Esther, whatever you want, thanks for making these meals, but let's get to the point over here. Whatever you want, I'll give you. Anything. You want half of the kingdom, I'll give it to you. Anything you want. So she says, okay, save my people. So who are your people? Says, there's someone who made a decree to kill all of my people. I want you to save them. And he said, well, who is this? Who made the decree? And he said, Haman. Here he is. He's sitting right here. And the king said, wow, Haman. He was the one. Who's your people? The Jews. Oh, your people are the Jews. And Haman wants to kill you. Haman, he did the same thing to the previous wife, Vashti. I really liked her. And Haman said, hang her, have her killed. So I did. I had her killed. I still regret that a little bit today. I mean, the king was really grateful he found Esther, but he would have never killed Vashti. He had nothing wrong with Vashti. She just didn't want to come to this big meal that he made. And now Haman wants to kill all the Jews. Hey, Mordechai is a Jew. Just last night, I read in my diary that he tried to save me. And someone comes in, all of a sudden, someone's in Charbonah, and he said, hey, look, there's a big gallows in Haman's backyard, and he wants to hang Mordechai on it. And so the king goes out to get calmed down, and Mordechai stumbles on the bed that Esther is on the bed. So he stumbles on top of Esther. So the king said, man, Haman, I mean, you're really out of your mind, man. I mean, what are you doing? Well, I don't understand. What is the point of what are you trying to do here? You're trying to kill my wife. You're trying to kill my best friends. And Mordechai to save my life. You're killing the Jews for no reason. And now you're trying to rape my wife right in front of me in my house. This is like, this is a new level of insanity. This is really, so the king gets all angry. So they cover Haman's face over. That's it. He's sentenced to death. And he says, take him and hang him on that tree, the 70-foot high tree or whatever it is, 80-foot high tree, hang him on it. Okay, so that's what happened, right? So they hung up Mordechai, and the king says to Esther, okay, what do you want? I killed Haman. You know what? Take all of his riches, take the ring, takes the ring off of his finger, off of Haman's finger, before he has him killed. Take the ring, and now you've got all the power, you have all the money, do whatever you want. And so Esther puts Mordechai over the house of Haman, in charge of all the money. And she says, but do me a favor, there's this decree that has gone out. And it just went out like yesterday, a couple of days ago. And the decree went out, and do me a favor, and rescind the decree. He says, I can't. The king says, I can't do it. If I put out a decree, I can't to say that it's null and void. My signature was wrong. What I'll do is I'll make another decree, and this will give the right for the Jews to defend themselves and even to kill their enemies. The Jews can kill their enemies. What do you say about that? So Esther says, if that's the best you can do, that's great. Thank you, Your Majesty. So Ratzim Rochvei Arechesh Ashranim Yatzu Bevualim. So it says the messengers that were on horseback, and the Achashdranim and chariots, whatever, they went quickly with the word of the king, and the king's decree was given in Shushan HaBira. What does it mean? They went quickly because they didn't have time. Tzololiam Lakdim Ratzim Rishonim Laviram, because they were trying. Maybe they could overtake the first messengers that came out and said to kill all the Jews. So it says that they went out quickly. Mavualim. They went out as a mavualim, like very. Mavualim means like how do you say? I'm not confused. How do you say with the urgency? Oh, like tremendously urgent. They were urgent. Mordechai was urging them lasot mehera to go fast because lo yalem panai, because they didn't have time. They didn't want to waste any time. Shayalem lahakdim. They were going to try to precede the first runners that went out. Now, the first runners, they went out with a message to kill. It ended up to kill all the Jews in like 12 months' time. So they weren't really that pressed, to get out quickly. On the other hand, it was a decree of the king, so they did have to go quickly. But the second ones, they had two things. First of all, it was a decree of the king. And second of all, it was urgent. They had to try to get there, to try to get to the people before the first one, so that it wouldn't come into people's minds at least 1 minute that you should kill all the Jews. Right here we have the Malbim also. The Malbim is going to be very interesting, but we'll learn some of the later where the Rashi doesn't comment. We'll learn what he says. For Mordechai went before the king in the garments of royalty, tach tchelet b'chur, like with crimson garments, and chur, another ateret zav, with a crown of gold, gadol, a big crown, tachrich boots, and boots can mean several things. It can also mean like fine silk, and sometimes boots also means fine wool. In any case, for argaman is another color, like what did I say, crimson or violet or something. And the Ir Shushan Tzaleh B'Samecha, and the city of Shushan was very, very happy. It was very, very tzahal b'simcha. This is one of the sentences, by the way, we say out loud. We say out loud in the middle of the Megillah. The reader of the Megillah stops, and everyone reads this sentence and the sentence right after it. O Mordechai, Yatzan Litnei Hamelech Bilabus Malchus Techil, Bilabus Malchus Techil Bechur Ater Zahav Gedolam Tachris Butra. Here Shushan Tzalav Samecha. Here you see the cantillation. Also in the Torah, there's a cantillation, but it's a little bit of different tune in the Megillah. Mordechai yatsa militnei hamelech b'levush malchus decheles v'chur ater zav v'gedola v'tachlis boots v'argamon. And then he's quiet. V'ayir Shushan tzalav samecha. Right, and then the whole crowd repeats. We'll say the next sentence, and we'll get to the next sentence in a moment. Rashi tachrich boots. This is a talis, which was, he said, a teret, a tachrich boots is some sort of like a cape that was made to good. The Malbim says, Meir Labush Ben Meir, something I can't remember his last name. Let me just look it up for 1 second. I'm sorry, I forgot it. He lived not that long ago, the Malbim. Malbim lived like about something like 150 years ago. 1 minute. No. Excuse me, let me just look this up. I'm sorry that I forgot. The Malbim is Meir Lavush Ben Yechiel Michal. And his last name was Weezer. Right? Meir Lavush Michal. Right. He was in the Ukraine, but the most of his time that he was in like Romania, I think. He had a lot of trouble from the Reform Jews, or whatever you want to call them, that were there. And he wrote this amazing commentary on the Torah. Right, he died in like 1879. So 1879, that's like, 250 years, something like that, he died ago. 150 years, I'm sorry. 150 years ago, he passed away. That's what he was living about that. Okay, the Malbim. Anyway, he says that a Malbim, the Malbim says that Mordechai went out in front of the king. He says this tells you the righteousness of Mordechai, that he didn't accept on himself any sort of greatness until he was certain that these letters had been sent out to help to save the Jews. And that's when it says that the city of Shushan was happy, because this fulfills what it says in Proverbs. But Rabot Tzadikim, when there are many righteous people, Yismach Am, then the people are happy. Shagam Amim, in other words, what is Am? Not just the Jews. Everyone is happy because Mordechai was victorious. In other words, it's good for the whole entire world. This is the second sentence we say in. We also say this in Havdalah. La Yehudim hayasara v'simcha v'sasam. To the Jews, La Yehudim hayasara v'simcha. There was light and joy and rejoicing, happiness and glory. And here we have an interesting thing from Toldot Aaron. Toldot Aaron says that the Jews had Ora v'simcha. What's Ora? Ora is Torah. The Jews were rejoicing with the Torah. They had sort of left the Torah in the time of, Achashverosh. They thought that maybe God left them, so they just sort of left God. Simcha, joy. This is Yom Tov, the holidays, and that's what it also says. V'samachta b'chagecha. Sason. This is the circumcision, and that's what it says in Tehillim. Sas anochi alei motecha. I rejoice all your. There's all these four things. Again, v'yakor, this is tefillin. This is tefillin. This is a sign on the head. Okay, these are four things especially that non-Jews also do. And this separates, it separates out the Jews from the non-Jews. It singles out the Jews. Why? Because, this is Torah. Torah, non-Jews also have their different Bibles and their different books. Yom Tov, non-Jews also have their holidays. Mila, circumcision, non-Jews do the circumcision. I know in America, all the children are circumcised, right? Non-Jews, circumcised. They're circumcised. And Yakar, they have tefillin. Non-Jews also have their signs, their icons, and their whatever is the things that they hang around their neck, the signs of their religion. It says, but the Jews, it's different. Why is it different? Because the whole idea of the Torah is that God gave himself to the Jews. And through the Torah, as we learn how to give ourselves to God. Give ourselves to God. By all the other Bibles of the world, this is what they can receive from their religion. Tells them what to do, so they'll go to heaven. And by us, our Torah is to teach us what we can give to the Creator. Same thing with joy. Joy that we have on Yom Tov is not the joy that we get because it's a happy day. It's a joy that we can give. We're thankful to God for what He gave us in the past, and we're returning back to God this good, the miracles that God did for us. Sason is the circumcision. By the non-Jews, I said they do circumcision, but they do it also for selfish reasons. They say claim it's healthy and it's better, it prevents certain diseases. But the Jewish people, they do circumcision. Why? Because this is a serving of God. It's a covenant. It's an agreement between them, the Jewish people, and God. And this agreement is when the child is 8 days old. In other words, it's in his flesh already before he even knows how to think. This is the covenant between the Jewish people and God, that they're willing to give everything, including to have pain in their life. Not only that, it says that the circumcision, it minimizes, it lessens, makes a little bit less the pleasure that people get from that area, right? Sexual pleasure, it says that it limits it. So, is it worth it, a thing like that? Yeah, if it's going to make you healthy, keeping a longer life, so I guess so. But the Jews don't do it because of health. They don't do it to receive anything. They do it in order to give themselves and put themselves in this covenant with God that they're going to do anything for the sake of the Creator, even if it hurts them. Pain. The yakar, by the way, in Jewish circumcision, they don't make anesthetic. They don't use anesthetic. Yakar, that's tefillin. The non-Jews have their sign, but the Jewish people, this is the sign of the Jews, is to link our thoughts and our heart. One is on the head, one's on the arm, to the Creator of the universe. So these are 4 things that singled out the Jews from the non-Jews, and that's, you have to remember that if Haman would have succeeded in his evil plans, there would be no more Jewish people. That would be it. The Jewish people would have been gone. There wouldn't have been one Jew in the world. He wanted to really exterminate all the Jewish people, and he had the ability to do it, and and everybody was with him. And all of a sudden, we'll see miraculously, at the last second, everything just turned around. And one of the reasons everyone wanted to kill the Jews was exactly this, because the Jews are different in their life purpose to serve the Creator. And every country and every city, Makom Asher Devar HaMelech Daso Magia, where the word of the king reached, Tata Magia Simcha B'Sasan LaYudim, it was joy and rejoicing for the Jewish people, Mishta Yom Tov, and Rabbi Miami Oretz, there were many of the non-Jews mityahadim, they actually converted. Ki nafel pachad HaYudim alayhem, suddenly for no explainable reason, there fell the fear of the Jews on the non-Jews. Now, this is before the big miracle of Purim, before the wars. This is still in the month of Nisan. This is like 12 months, 11 months before the wars of Purim, the actual victories of Purim occurred. It says that as soon as this letter of the king, the second letter of the king, came, as it says, the first letter. The first letter was sent out, and it said there's a certain people that we have to kill, and it didn't say who it was. The letter that Haman sent out, no dunamao, it was not known. Haman didn't want the Jews to know that they were being killed. It just happened that Mordechai found out. But the second letter said that if anyone tries to kill the Jews, as you can kill them first, you can stand on your soul and protect yourself. But as soon as the Jews found out, so they became tremendously happy, and then there fell a tremendous fear on the non-Jews, to the degree that a lot of the non-Jews started to convert. That all of a sudden the king is sending out letters to save the Jews. When was there ever such a thing? A weird thing like this. I still haven't really gotten the trick of this whole thing. One second. Oh, there we go. Here we go. It worked. I did it. I did found something. Oh, hey, look at this. Perek Tess Aleph. Okay, now things started to get interesting. Now we're getting close to the actual war, right? Now here we got two groups. One group there's two letters. One letter went out, and the first letter says you can kill the Jews, right? You can kill the Jews. A lot of people that were really happy with that letter that they've been. Then there was another letter that said that the Jews can kill their enemies. They can kill all their enemies. And so the Jews were happy about that. And then there was a lot of people that were sort of in the middle, and no one knew really who they're going to go with. And there was also the soldiers of the king. The king's soldiers were all over. So they also didn't exactly understand what was going on. There was no clear orders for them. On one hand, there was an order to kill the Jews. On the other hand, there was an order that the Jews could fight back, and that was sealed by the king. The Jews could fight back. So the soldiers, they didn't know, well, who should they be with? I mean, here's a sign. This is sealed by the king, and this is sealed by the king. So what should they do? So it says, now we're going to find out. Ubeshneim asor chodesh hu chodesh adar bishlosha asor yom bo asher higia davar hamelech v'dason le'asos bayom asher sibru oivei haYehudim lishlot b'hem v'nafochu asher yishlotu haYehudim heima b'sonihem. That's the melody that the Magila is sung. What did I just say? On the 12th month, that's the month of Nisan. We're jumping here. We jumped to 12 months. On the month of Nisan, on the month of, Adar, here it comes. And on the 13th day, that was the day that everybody said they were supposed to kill the Jews. That reached the word of the king and his law to do, in other words, to kill the Jews. Bayom asher sibru oivei Yehudim, that was announced to the enemies of the Jews, lishlot b'hem, that the Jews now, the enemies of the Jews could now rule over the Jews and kill them. V'nafochu, all of a sudden everything turned over. It was exactly the opposite. Yehudim, that the Jews, they ruled over their enemies. Now let's see what the Malbim says. Let's see if we can get this right. Watch this. The Malbim says like this. Okay, again, he repeats. The letter that Haman sent out, it wasn't exactly clear to kill the Jews, but everybody came to understand that. The letter which was sent out by Mordechai, this said clearly that the Jews could take revenge. And so now, what's going on over here? So it says, first of all, that came the time of the king to do. Then it was revealed also what was in the letters. In other words, that the Jews were now the target. The Zos Shenis in the second letter was the time to do. It wasn't possible on that day to do nothing. There were two letters clearly saying you have to do something. On one end, it says that the Jews had power to kill their enemies. On the other one, it said that anyone wanted to could kill the Jews. So to just stand around and do nothing, they couldn't. One second, excuse me. All right, let's just get down to here. It says, down here, the Malbim says, Bayom asher sibru avei Yehudim lishlot b'hem, the day when it was advertised to the enemies of the Jews that they could rule over the Jews. Right? That's the 13th. That was the first letter that was sent out right in the beginning of the Megillah, right? So listen to this, what he says. Sheyom haya goram, that this day was a special day that the non-Jews could rule over the Jews. And now God showed his tremendous, hashgacha, his direction, how God is really directing every detail of the world. Because not only did the enemies of the Jews not defeat the Jews, I skipped, I'm sorry. I wanted to do this here. Watch this. This is what I wanted to. This is what I want. Right? Here's the big miracle, right? Yeah. The miracle was, like, a person could not just sit and do nothing. Either you had to be against the Jews or you had to be with the Jews. Now, who was going to win? Who was going to defend? Says this was the word of the king said that you have to do something. You have to fight. You have to fight, and you have to either fight on one side or the other. Avalbad kavart samach mazel otoyom, but the how do you say the luck, the spiritual force of that day was for this saving the Jewish people. Saving the Jewish people. Why? Because this is what I want to say. Alpia mazel, according to how the zodiac worked, right? If you looked at the chart of where the planets were and everything, there was a tremendous hashgacha, because according to the mazel, the spiritual, how do you say, the zodiac, what's how they say the word? Anyway, the Jewish people was the lowest. The Jewish point were the Jewish people, the luck of the Jewish people was at its, what do they call it? Perigee, and the lowest it could possibly be. This was like the most unlucky month it could possibly be for the Jewish people. Haman knew what he was doing. Incidentally, I don't know if you know it or not, and I don't know if it's true, but at least that's right, that Hitler had a whole staff of astrologers that told him all which moves to make. At one time, I used to be into astrology a long time ago, not really very seriously, deeply into it, but I was into it. And I read a few articles about where his astrologers made their mistakes. And there's other people that say that they didn't make any mistakes at all. They were exactly, the astrologers were exactly right. He should have won everything. And so all of a sudden, and this is the same thing with Haman. Neged ze kochab Amalek. This is the star, the spiritual influence of Amalek was the highest, the enemies of the Jews. Therefore, Haman decided that day and that month. That's why it said that this day was what caused that a big miracle for the Jewish people. Because not only did the enemies of the Jews not defeat the Jews, but it was exactly the opposite. From one end to the other, that the enemies, they were from the highest of highs that they could possibly be to the lowest of lows. Now these people, it's like, when the Germans, they went into war, this was Amalek, right? They just killed everybody. They were like really good at it. They were really good at killing people. They had the best weapons and the best tanks and the best trained men and the best pilots, and they were tremendously motivated, and they had been practicing, killing people before there was even any war. Before they blitzed in, nobody knew what was going on. These people were excellent murderers. They just loved it and they were good at it, and they practiced it so they'd even be better. Well, that was the same thing over here in the time of Haman. Not everybody hated the Jews, but those people that did, they were really, into it. That was their whole life. They trained and they worked. They traded war secrets or whatever it is. And not only did they, and the Jews on the other hand, they weren't trading for war. They weren't particularly interested in making war, and for sure they weren't. They didn't consider making war on some innocent people. But nevertheless, miraculously, when that day came, the Jews, the Yisrael Olu Mishol Tachtis, the Jews rose up from the lowest of levels to the highest of high. And this is one miracle. That's what it says, V'nafochu, that it was exactly the opposite of what it was supposed to be. Right? According to nature, the Jews had no chance. The second miracle was, it was not natural. Shebakvar yikra shmi shemazlo betachlit shiflot yitgaber im yazru. It should have been that even a person that's very low, as maybe they could help in other people that are very successful, right? And the people who, so listen, a person who's very low is very weak, so we get somebody to help him out, right? He pays a protection agency or something, and they'll help him out. It says, but here, the Jews fought alone. No one came to help them. And nevertheless, they won. So it was a double miracle. A double miracle. Nikalu Yehudim, the Jews all gathered. Now you have to realize that the Jews were scattered around the whole world. I imagine that the Jewish percentage of the population of the world was pretty much the same as now. I don't think it was much different as it is now. The Jewish people are like what 0.2% or something like that, 0.02% of the whole world. Like 1 out of every 500 people is a Jew at most. I think that's really not so. I think it must be much less than that. But nevertheless, okay. You do the mathematics. How many Jews are there? There's about 20 million Jews in the world. 20 million Jews. And there's like 8-9 billion people in the world. So get all the zeros all fixed up, and you'll see that we're seriously outnumbered. Nevertheless, the Jews, even though they were all scattered around, and they were not warriors, and they weren't and the Jews weren't unified at all, but they were, as far as this goes. As soon as they got the letter that there were enemies that were going to try to kill them, and the Jews could defend themselves, the Jews got together in all their countries, of Achashverosh, and they smote those who wanted to kill them. No one could stand in front of them. All of a sudden, everybody got scared of the Jews. I mean, really, that's what it was. The Rebbe made the examples. That's what it was in the 6-day war. In the 6-day war, it was really just the same like this, except for the aftermath. We'll see in a second. Here it's going to say that when the Jews defeated their enemies, they sent letters out to everyone in the world, letting them know about this tremendous victory. And in the 6-day war was exactly the opposite. The Israeli government sent letters out to everybody in the world saying it was an accident and we didn't intend to do it, and we're not a conquering nation, and we're going to give everything back, and we didn't intend to fight. And the whole thing was just a big, it was a big, unintentional. It was unintentional. We won the war unintentionally. We had our backs to the wall and we just went crazy. Well, no, we promise we won't do it again. The Rebbe said it was exactly the opposite of what happened in the holiday of Purim when they advertised the victory. Right here, they're apologizing for the victory. What are you going to do? Okay. All the Jews gathered together in all their countries, and they ruled over their enemies. All the ministers of the countries and the Achashdarpanim, another type of ministers, whatever they are, important people, and the Pachot, another type of people that do this work for the king, the Menassim at Yehudim, all of a sudden, everyone started helping the Jews. Because now they're afraid, not of the Jews, they're afraid of Mordechai. Those people who were appointed to do all the needs of the king, right? And the king's ministers or his workers, all of a sudden they became afraid of Mordechai. They were afraid that Mordechai had spiritual powers or godly powers. They saw that God was with him. And then all of a sudden, Haman, everybody was afraid of Haman. Everyone was bowing down to Haman, right? And suddenly, because Haman tried to touch Mordechai, he built a big gallows for Mordechai. So all of a sudden, everything just trapped. And the gallows that Mordechai was supposed to, anyone thinks about Mordechai, you see what happens. Even Haman, who he was the top of the top, he was the big, henchman. And all of a sudden, he was hung. And not only was he hung on the thing. The same gallows that he wanted for Mordechai. So everyone was afraid of Mordechai, whatever Mordechai does. So now all of a sudden everybody's helping the Jews. Because Mordechai was great in the house of the king, and his name, his reputation went out in all the countries. Because Mordechai holech v'gadol, because Mordechai got greater and greater. Everybody learned, and especially what was Mordechai's whole thing? The whole thing of Mordechai was Torah. That was the whole thing of the Torah. It's the same thing with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The essence of the whole greatness of the Lubavitcher Rebbe is Torah. I mean, the greatness is his love of all mankind and his spreading out Judaism everywhere and his fearlessness. But it's the same thing with Mashiach. If you look in the Rambam, the main thing of the Mashiach is that he knows the whole Torah, he learns the whole Torah, and does the whole Torah. So the greatness of Mordechai was because that they realized that the Torah is really a powerful thing. It's not just a book in the library. It's not just some book that the Jews had a long time ago, now it doesn't work anymore. Suddenly they realize that the whole power, and that's what it says, the Yuri Moya, Ora v'simcha. Ora is Torah. Ora v'simcha v'sasav Torah. Ora is the Torah. We're going to see it, but we won't do it today. We'll have to do it tomorrow. That only now did the Jews really accept the Torah. The holiday of Purim occurred about 1,000 years after the Jews received the Torah. 1,000 years after the Jews received the Torah, that was the holiday of Purim. And it said it took all that time. The Jews didn't really get the whole point of the Torah until the time of Mordechai. One more, and then we'll have to go tomorrow. Ready? And the Jews smote all of their enemies, makat cherev v'hereg v'avdan, with the sword, and killing them and destroying them, and they did kibisoneim to their enemies whatever they wanted to. The Jews did to their enemies whatever they wanted to. And the Malbim explains it, and God willing, we'll continue tomorrow. We'll try to finish the Megillah tomorrow. I don't know if we'll actually succeed. It might take another day. God bless you all. Have a good day with Mashiach now, and hope to see you tomorrow at 8:15 in the morning.